this to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Let's dive into this. Mike, thanks for being on. Congressman Mike Waltz on the show.
I prefer Colonel, but that's okay. Congressman too.
Did you vote for? You did vote for my amendment to make the Space Force use Navy ranks.
I did.
Yeah,
I did. I think they need a big break from the Air Force.
They think
total cultural break.
They think they've escaped me on this one. They have not. Just because the Senate's a bunch of boring old senators and doesn't want to put my amendment in. But I'm coming for you, Space Force.
Hey, I'm pro Space Force. It was the first bill I put in.
No such thing as a Colonel Kirk. Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
It's got to be Captain Kirk.
Yeah. That's all right.
Well, we agree. Army and Navy.
We got to get them out from under the thumb of the Air Force, though. They do need a whole separate culture on a serious note.
I agree. So, Mike Waltz, what district in Florida?
Florida 6, Northeast Florida, suburbs of Jacksonville down to Cape Canaveral. Nice. Daytona is the hub. So, gotta love NASCAR, gotta love beaches, and gotta love motorcycles.
And you're still in the reserves, right?
Still in the National Guard.
Okay. Oh, yep. National Guard.
Yep. Still jumping.
Colonel, Special Forces, Green Beret.
Yep.
Right. Now you have an interesting background. We came into Congress together, but you would sort of, because you were in the reserves, you would switch between active duty, going to Afghanistan, and the Special Forces. Which group?
20th Group. And what was unique about the experience is my day job. So 20th Group is reserve component, Special Forces. SEALs also have a reserve component. But that meant I had to have a day job, and for many years it was as a policy director under Rumsfeld, and then Secretary of Gates, and then eventually in the Bush White House. And I had this fascinating. There I was in the West Wing, Mr. President. This should be the policy. And then I had to be the only idiot in Washington to go do it, and better make sure the strategy's right if your butt's on the line. But the fun part would be, which you could appreciate, then coming back to Washington, putting the coat and tie back on, and saying, "Hey, boss. What you said to do was not what we're doing out on the ground," and to try to fix things.
That's awesome. Look, let's get right to it. Wokeism ruins everything. It ruins Dr. Seuss. It ruins Paw Patrol. It ruins Aunt Jemima. And frankly, it's ruining the military. Wokeism might also be defined in this sense as excessive political correctness. Now, I think wokeism probably means a lot more than that. Critical race theory, identity politics, but frankly, that's infiltrating the military too. We're going to talk about that. You and I have both received plenty of letters from active duty personnel telling us what's really going on. Kind of reminds me of the kind of letters that I get from parents talking about what's happening in their schools. This is really bad. Look, because it's kind of funny when Aunt Jemima gets canceled. I mean, it's not funny, but it's a little funny. But this is serious. I mean, like, the priorities of our military is supposed to be war fighting, and that's literally it. It is the Department of Defense. It is not the Department of Social Engineering. This stuff really matters for the safety of our country, for the protection of a very, very sacred institution. I mean, the military has the highest credibility in the public right now. And we're seeing all sorts of nonsense, like the Tucker Carlson thing. Like, we saw that this week. Everybody was blown up over that. We'll get to that later. I think you and I both kind of think that one's a bit silly, but there's some things to unpack.
Yeah, there's some important things in there.
There's some things to unpack, but like, a lot of people are missing a lot of other stuff. Some of the training going on, the funding of transgender reassignment surgery. Although I just heard the Joint Chiefs actually put a pause on that because they're like, "Whoa, Biden." So thank you for that, Joint Chiefs. But there's a couple SEALs that are, coming out this way. We're going to have a hard conversation about women in the military or in the combat roles specifically. I think people need to understand that a little bit more. That they don't hear from people who understand combat all that often. And so let's have a candid conversation about that, I think. So do you guys have an ethos in the Special Forces? You do.
We do. You have it memorized.
Oh, it's it's like
Deo presso liber.
Yeah.
I know it's Latin, so it's hard for SEALs to understand.
We don't speak multiple languages.
Yeah, but it's to free the oppressed. which is so the Green Berets
Well,
founding
that's a saying, but like
actually was under Kennedy.
But you have a whole like list of things I forgot. Oh, it's like
soft truths.
Soft
You
truths.
can't mass produce.
Oh, that's some good stuff. So we have an ethos, right? It's definitely better than anything you guys have. But there was an uproar because it says things like "I am that man," right? Like it's gendered, right? Because there's only men. There's only male Navy SEALs. Always has been. Currently always is. Now you can try out if you're a woman, but nobody, only one, ever has, and she was injured before she even got into training.
Sure.
And the question is like, does it matter? This is always the debate, right? Just give an inch. Like, what does it matter? And I don't know, man, is there validity to that? Because on the other hand, it's like once you give an inch, they take a million more miles.
Yeah, for me, it's always been an issue of standards, not necessarily gender, right? I mean, the standards are what they are. The artillery round weighs what it weighs. That rucksack is 90 pounds, throwing a 200-pound man on your shoulders, which you need to be prepared to do and get, uphill to the helicopter under fire. Those are the standards, and we've gone through an evolution in the military to say all MOSs, not just the supporting roles, all military occupational specialties should be open. I'm fine with that. Everyone should be able to compete, and if a woman meets the standards that we've set to be in combat as an infantryman or as an artilleryman or tank or a tank operator, fine. But what I found over time is that we open up those specialties. There are plenty of women, there are plenty of athletic women that will outperform the average male. But there are physiological differences, and we recognize those. That's why we have men and women's sports, and that's why we have those various differences. And what I find is the same groups pounding the table to allow women access to all of these roles, then a couple of years down the line are then pounding the table and saying, well, why is only a certain percentage getting through? You must have systematic discriminatory policies. And then
that's where it gets toxic.
And then it becomes a pressure to lower the standards. Right. And now it's
Right.
equity based rather than equality based. And I know you've talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
And that's the real
It's a
danger. The danger
microcosm of the
is
broader
the lowering
society.
of our standards within our most demanding and our most elite forces.
Yeah, the reason, actually, I guess I didn't even explain to the audience what I was talking about. The reason the ethos caused a stir was because, look, it's gendered, or it was. It says man. Like, if you look up old versions of it, it uses the word man, and then they changed it to not use the word man. Maybe they use SEAL or some gender neutral term. And because I want to get to everything you talked about just women in combat and everything, but I'm actually starting on a softer approach to that, which is like. Again, does it even matter when you change little things here and there? Is this political correctness run amok, or does it matter? And like, look, because I've had conversations with flag officers about this when I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, why did you let that transgender SEAL go on CNN? That's politicizing the military. Yeah. He's an active duty SEAL. He's not even at a SEAL command anymore. Now it turns out SEAL teams did not let him go on CNN. The Navy did, because he or she can't even be in the SEAL teams anymore because they want to transition. Anyway, the point is I have this honest conversation with people, which is, look, they're like, hey, we're trying to do an honest job here. Like because my goal is still to man equip and train my force and make sure they're ready to go to combat. Yes, I realize there's this whole other political world out there. They want me to do this. And if I have to give a couple inches, fine, if it gets them off my back. And on my side, I'm like, look, you can never give a couple inches, because as you do, they ask for another mile. They always do. The woke brigade always comes for you. And frankly, I kind of think both sides are right in a way, and I'm not sure how to balance that.
Yeah, I actually don't have a problem with the kind of the neutralization in terms of the language. If you're going to open it up to everyone, at the end of the day, I just want the best. I want the best pilots, the best cyber warriors, the best SEALs. The Green Beret is already the best, but I want the best of the best. Yeah. Right?
You know what we say about Green Berets? Nothing.
Handsome. Great beards.
Great. Yeah, sometimes.
Good hair.
Good beards. Oh, please. Yeah. Oh, you're projecting.
Great
See,
shots.
You're projecting what you.
But the point is, But the point is, we want the best Americans out there fighting our wars. And I think the point that a lot of people are trying to make is that the military needs to be about winning our wars, not social experimentation. Period. Because I guarantee you,
outcome-based,
or about
proportionality,
outcome-based,
like you said, yeah.
Because I guarantee you, that's what the Russian military is about. As poor as it is, they're putting the best they possibly can, and it's definitely about what the Chinese military is about. Right now, as we speak, they're social engineering with genetic crisping and experimenting with how to create super soldiers.
Well, one thing it's important to point out to people is women have always had a very robust role in special operations. Like there's this idea that all of a sudden they're allowed in and it's going to like open it up to women. Women have always been part of special operations in a very profound way. Look, if you're looking at like there's a whole other side of special operations, that let's call it the sneaky peeky stuff. Women are very
particularly
good,
on the clandestine, the clandestine side.
Women are
source
highly
recruiting.
suited for this because this is what is involved in this. It's talking to people. It's eliciting information. Maybe you need to play a role. Maybe that role needs to be a woman's role. And look, the transgender Navy SEAL just can't play the role. It's just not going to work. So women have always played that role. Also, there's female engagement teams. Yep. I've done many operations in Iraq and Afghanistan where you have to bring women out.
Well, men are precluded.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to
allowed to see
engage
the
with half the populace there, right?
Yeah. You can't
so
even look
we
at
did
the
it ad
Afghan
hoc. I mean, we would pull in nurses, military, police women, pilots, you name it, anybody that could go out and had the physicality to go on the mission, and they were invaluable. Heck, my fiance was a military intelligence officer with more combat tours than I have in both invasions. So this notion that that women don't play a critical role, I do disagree with. And whether it's pilots, cyber warriors, intel officers, you name it. But I think where, as you were talking about, where the crux of the debate comes down is in the areas where physicality is so important. And there's biological differences.
And in that mission, so there's a woman on the mission. So your average person listening right now who knows nothing about what we do is probably thinking, well, if they're already out there, then why can't they just be a SEAL? And here's my answer to that. Because a SEAL has to do everything required of us in the heat of combat at any given moment. And it gets really, really ugly. Yep. Really, really fast. And if you have a trident on your chest, it means that you have to be able to engage in that and to activate right away. So you might just be, again, like
a special forces tab, but I take your point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you want to operate at that standard. But the point is like, if you're wearing the tab, if you're wearing the trident, some things are required of you. You have to be able to take over the squad. You have to be able to take over the platoon, like right away, and lead people in combat. You have to be able to fight a 200-pound man off of you who just jumped on you. You have to be able to pull your buddy off the X, is what we call it, if they just got blown up and they're missing their legs and screaming, and you have to be able to fight while you're doing that. And so, no, not just because you're on the mission and people don't realize,
it's
just because you're an we call them enablers. You're in addition to the mission.
But I want to be clear too. I am absolutely confident there are women out there who can do those roles.
There might be, yeah.
It's how do we do that how do we take that to scale, right? Yeah. And across the entire special operations force. And my point has been and will continue to be, what are the standards to be a SEAL, to be a Green Beret, to be a Ranger? And whoever meets them. But whether that's 2% of women or 58% of women, it doesn't matter. But that's where we have to toe the line. Yeah. The problem is if it's only 15% or 20% or 30%, then those same groups come back around later and say, no, you're being discriminatory. Right. You got to lower the standards to let more in. That's the problem.
And we've seen that over the years, certainly, hints of it in the Obama administration, especially. I'm still not sure if we're going to see that now. I haven't seen hints of it. And the other thing is, at least in the SEAL teams, those standards have been set in concrete. It wasn't always the case that all the crazy crap we did in training and BUDS was justified and attached to an actual mission requirement. Now it is. Like this is why we carry logs up and down the sand berms. This is why we freeze ourselves.
I don't think you're seeing it in the SEALs yet, but the Army, a much bigger force, they are starting to see it. It's always driven me nuts that we have men's physical fitness standards and women's physical fitness standards. I'm like, wait a minute. The tank, the artillery round, the rucksack, they're all the same regardless of gender. So the Army's now moved to, which was a big move in the last couple of years, to say, you know what, the physical standards for infantry is very different than, say, a personnel clerk, and we're going to make those standards different, and we're going to combine. It's all one standard, regardless of gender. Well, now here we are a couple of years later, and various activist groups are coming back and saying, wait a minute, a woman can't get promoted in the infantry or in the armor or artillery because these physical standards are too high, so therefore you need to lower them. So actually we're seeing that in the combat arms. I don't think it's really happened yet in special operations, but I fear it's coming.
Yeah, well, special operations I think has inoculated itself better because we saw it coming. But you're absolutely right about what you're saying. You know who agrees with you is Captain Kristen Geist. So she wrote an op-ed in February of this year where she talks about
one of the first female Rangers.
Yeah, so she got her Ranger tab in 2015. So just to be clear, people need to understand, like Ranger School, frankly, probably should have always been open to everybody because it's not a selection course. People don't realize that. You don't graduate Ranger School and you're a Ranger. That's not how it works. You go back to whatever unit you're from. So a lot of SF guys go to Ranger School. A lot of pilot. I think she was a pilot.
I'm not sure. I think actually she was infantry in the National Guard. She was yeah,
you're right. Infantry
but there
was
point,
another pilot woman who
it's primarily a leadership school.
It is, yeah.
That starves you. I mean, I lost 31 pounds.
Yeah,
that sleep deprives you. I probably should. It's a good diet. But it puts you under the most extreme duress and says, lead your men and women who are also starving, sleep deprived, hallucinating, over that mountain, across that stream, conduct the mission to standard, get the job done. It has a very high attrition rate, but at the end of the day, it is about finding, digging deep within yourself, finding your own flaws, and being able to dig deep and lead in the most extreme conditions that you probably find in training.
And it's a leadership course. Yeah. Again, I think females always should have been in it. But anyway, they have been for a while now. A few have made it through. And but she argues like one of the worst things you can do is these different standards for men and women in combat roles. Like I in the Navy, I kind of get it because there's a lot of jobs like warfighting is 95% logistics. Like there's a lot of jobs where you're at a radar the entire time. Mm-hmm. Like so I kind of get the different standards for men and women to allow everybody to serve.
But I think those are different standards by what kind of job you're doing.
Sure.
Regardless,
yeah.
I mean, but men or a woman.
But for infantry, this is different, and this is the point that she is making here, that you agree with, that I agree with, which is for these kind of roles, you have to be the same. And like she makes it from a feminist standpoint. She's like, look, I don't want to be ostracized because people think I have a lesser standard than they do. Mm-hmm. I want to operate at the same standard so that I'm not ostracized. I need to be part of the team. This is extremely important for unit cohesion, for mutual respect. That's an emphatically reasonable thing to say, I think. She's
speaking out against tokenism, and tokenism is demeaning to women.
It really is. It's worth pointing out some of the stats on this. This stuff has been studied quite a bit. SOCOM did look at it. The Marines looked at it. Look, all male rifleman squads outperformed mixed gender squads. By some kind of margin. Injury rates are double for women than they are for men. So, look, there's things that you can't escape in the data. Interpret that how you will. I do tend to agree with you that the best way out of all of this mess is to simply standardize it. And like the standard doesn't change. It has to be very, very high because our lives are at stake and the defense of our country is at stake. And whatever happens as an outcome based on those standards happens. Maybe a woman will make it through BUDS. I don't know. One woman just made it through SF training through the Q course.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And I think I'm fine with that as long as there's been no downward pressure on the standards. And if whether it's 1 or whether it's 100, that's okay.
Now, it is worth pointing out, I mean, people are like, well, look, there's a lot of women out there who could kick most guys' butts. That's true, but that's also not the question. The question is, can they kick most Navy SEALs' butts in every single category, right? Like, there's a lot of female powerlifters that would absolutely destroy me, but they certainly can't outrun me and outswim me, and the question is like, is it a matter of all three? And you get to a point where there's a lot of overlap between men and women, but the question is what's happening at the tail ends of the spectrum. And is there really overlap there? But again, it's like, just standardize it. Just standardize it and you're good. All right, let's move on. But I think that helps the audience understand, like, from an operator's perspective, like what we're really dealing with and frankly, what the solutions are. I want to go back to some wokeism because there's so much to talk about.
Topics.
Well, there's so much to talk about. I tweeted about this recently. The Navy reading list, the Navy official reading list, had on it a book in there's different sections in the reading list, and one of them is foundational to your character. And on this list with Jocko's book, with a book about stoicism, is Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. What on earth do we do about that? Is the Army doing anything like that?
Actually, I just had someone send me a screenshot from a West Point cadet's computer, where they were doing a course on how to. The title across was Dealing with White Rage. So critical race theory and things along those lines have infused our academies, have infused our force. And we're now seeing the defense secretary come out and say his top priority is dealing with extremism in the ranks. Oof.
What have you dove into that? So we'll get to the reading list. Well, actually, let me say real quick about the reading list. This is a bunch of crap. The pure and simple. How to Be an Anti-Racist is an extremely divisive book, right? It basically tells you that the only way you're an anti-racist is if you acknowledge your racism, admit you're a racist, and then
acknowledge your privilege.
Yeah, and see everything through a lens of race.
But
critical race theory.
Where it's so dangerous is that he takes the next step and says, and you also must admit that America is inherently misogynistic, colonialistic, and racist.
And there's no escaping it. There's no out.
That's right.
There's no there's no solution here.
And there's no, there's no redeeming things that the United States has done, like lifting billions out of poverty. But so you must admit all of those things, and therefore you have a duty to be anti-American. This is what we have our new sailors reading as they come into the United States Navy as a foundational book, so that the country that they're going to risk their life to defend is fundamentally flawed, and therefore you have a duty to be anti-American.
It's a great way to put it, and I called on the CNO to immediately address it. Do they not know what they're seeing? Or is it happening under their noses? Look, I don't know the explanation, but I want one.
I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and we're going to get one.
Well, yeah, let's ask. Yeah,
when they come asking for their budget, that's going to be a question.
Right. I mean, what's your priorities? Because you guys have a budget full of bombs and missiles and pay raises and personnel, and it seems all good, but it doesn't seem like it's a priority of the public.
What has me so concerned, aside from the system, how they view the country that we're asking them to defend. But, Dan, you and I know when you're on the black helicopter in the middle of the night going after Al-Qaeda on the other side of the world, nobody's asking. You're not looking at your teammates and saying, are you black, white, brown, Jewish? Nobody cares. They certainly don't care about political party.
Right.
It's about mission. It's about country. It's about our values. It's about getting the job done. And what he talks about in that book is antithetical to the mission-based, mission-focused, merit-based military that you and I came up in, and it's what made us the best military in the world.
The goal of that book is to make it about race.
Right.
Like that's literally the stated goal of the book. It's like you have to stop looking at people as the content of their character. You have to stop being colorblind. We need you to see color at all times. I can't imagine a more toxic thing to do to an institution that relies on social cohesion and seeing each other as a fellow Marine or a fellow sailor or a fellow
American.
airman. fellow
I mean,
American.
the old adage, the enemy's bullets could care less about black, white, or brown. All they care about is whether you're American or not. I mean, the enemy doesn't care.
It's like the Soviet Union came back to life and populated the Navy reading list. Because this is exactly what they talk about demoralizing. I mean, did you ever seen that interview with, it's this old KGB agent? The interview's from 1984. Yeah. It's an amazing interview. Everybody should watch it. I can't remember what the guy's name is, but if you like Google KGB agent 1984, you'll find it. And he talks about the steps the Soviets took to demoralize Americans. And it's basic, and that's what's kind of started the 60s revolution, right? These ideas. It's
what the North Koreans did in their brainwashing camps, where they had multiple American soldiers, get on international television and sign statements, denouncing the United States, but they use societal wedges, the biggest one being race.
Right.
And now we have
Vietnam. You talking about North Vietnam?
No, North Korea and North Vietnam.
Both.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's it's easy to screw with us, and we can't feed into it. I think that's the point. Okay, what were you saying about the West Point? We'll finish that. Story.
It's a parent of a West Point cadet that sent me a screenshot from one of their classes that said how to deal with your white rage. That's the class, the critical race theory class that they're taking. But I think at a bigger level, we now have when a new secretary comes in, and this, Dan, just as a new commander of a unit, the first couple of things you do really sets the tone in terms of your priorities.
Yeah.
So Secretary Austin has ordered an operational stand down across the entire force.
Oh, that's what we want. Yeah.
To deal with extremism in the ranks. And I want to be very clear. We always want to root out extremists in our ranks, but it's all kinds of extremists. He said in his memo, specifically white supremacists.
Really?
We should root out all extremists, whether you're anarchists, whether you're a West Point cadet.
So it didn't mention Antifa.
Whether you're Antifa, anarchist, communist, you name it.
But he didn't say that.
He said extremists, particularly white supremacists.
And the question I have for him, if he was sitting right here, right now, what evidence do you have that we have a white supremacy problem in the military? If you're going to accuse hundreds of thousands of people of being a part of this, because that's what you're doing by saying you're going to root it out, whether you like it or not. I'm
or
sure
that
they would claim
that
otherwise.
it's of such scale that
Right.
it's infiltrated the
What
military.
the hell are you talking about?
It has been there, it is there, and it should always be dealt with. And there's regulations defining what an extremist is, and all commanders should uphold those regulations. But is it of such scale within our military that it has to be one of the first things that you do as a new defense secretary? So I'm looking at it in terms of priorities.
Right.
We have the Chinese Navy that's larger than ours now. They're building ships every other month at a rate 5-to-1, outbuilding us. They launched more into space last year than the rest of the world combined. They're literally biologically making super soldiers. Mm-hmm. Their president is telling their military to prepare for war and invading Taiwan, and this is the first thing and the most important thing that he's focused on. So it just really caused me to raise an eyebrow in terms of his priorities.
And what do you think they're doing to quote unquote root it out? I mean, are they just looking through social media posts? I'm not exactly sure what they're doing at this point. Doesn't seem like a whole lot. I think that's the good news.
You and I know what an operational stand down in terms of a training problem, if you have a fratricide, if you have a maintenance problem, say in your aircraft, but an operational stand down, so you're stopping training and everything you're doing as a military to then root out extremism. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. What does that actually look like?
In the past, it looks like a...
Is that a PowerPoint?
Yeah, no, it really is in the past. So, but that just drives people apart, right? If that's what it's just, and it's going to lower morale considerably. I bet if we took the temperature on morale in the military a few months ago versus now, I think I know exactly what would be happening, right? Because everybody feels like they're being accused. I think that, a lot of people are really concerned about is the line that the administration is drawing, the very fine line between white supremacist, extremist, conservative, and Trump supporter is very, very thin. Oh yeah, well they've been doing it
very
for a long
thin,
time,
right?
They've been doing it for a long time.
But to now have the leader of the United States military kind of seeming to maybe slip down that road, it's not clear to me yet, is concerning.
It's extremely concerning. I'm going to read I'm going to kind of summarize. I've gotten so many letters along these lines, and so I'm going to kind of summarize all of them. But they basically people emailing me about the officer training that they deal with. So, in the Navy, you probably do this in the Army too. At about the 04, you guys don't do anything. The 04, 05 level, you do like, mid-level, intermediate training. Just learning how to be that next level of leader is how I would describe what is usually a couple weeks of training. You kind of retreat out there. It's a mixed people, pilots, SWOs,
yours might be
SEALs.
like
SEALs do a specific one actually.
A couple of weeks and drinking some tea and
we're already such better leaders
crumpets
than the Army that we don't need it, but we do it anyway. But you know what I never did was unconscious bias training. One of the reasons I don't think we ever did it was because unconscious bias is voodoo pseudoscience crap. It doesn't actually mean anything. But this is what we're doing, apparently, in our military. Now, unconscious bias training, I got some of it at Harvard. I remember that, right? And they put you through this sort of debunked. It is totally debunked. Right? There's no evidence that shows there's a link, a causality between unconscious bias and actual behavior, actual choices that are made. But anyway, we do it anyway because everybody's bad and everybody needs to be told that they're racist, right? And then they need to read how to be an anti-racist in order to redeem yourself. This has become almost like a religious doctrine. And we're putting it in our military. And they're going through this and they're asked like certain questions like, okay, you see somebody on a train, like what are you thinking about them? Like what would you do this? What would you do here? This is evidence that you're a racist. This is evidence that you are biased. And this has the potential to affect your decisions even if you don't know it. And so you're guilty no matter what.
Yeah. Well, and here's, you play that forward into a combat scenario, right? And you're in a situation where you've got to run through the hail of machine gun fire to go get your buddy and to drag him back. And darn well you may die before you ever get there. Or you see someone take that action or not take that action in that instant. I mean, I've seen someone literally curl up into a ball and start crying. In the face of fire. It was not me. It was an awful night. In all seriousness, but here's where that. So we're now going to start planting that seed in our soldiers, sailors, Marines of maybe they didn't go get that guy because he was black or he was brown.
Yeah,
or,
that's toxic,
right? I mean, that is truly toxic because everybody reacts in different ways in those scenes. In those scenarios, and some far better than others. But what we can't have seeping in at a very basic level. I mean, this is in basic training. This is in intermediate office training. This is at the academies, is that race or religion has something to do with that. And it will eat away like termites at the foundation of our military.
Like, we have to get back to basic liberal principles of logic and due process, wherein, if you indeed are going to accuse somebody of this, there has to be some amount of evidence and linear reasoning to get you there. You can't just say, well, it's unconscious. You don't know you're doing this wrong, but you are. Well, then how can I ever get better? Like you literally can't. And in fact, it's like the movie Inception. Like that idea is in there. So you're probably thinking about it much more than you otherwise would have. And if you're a minority, well, now you're constantly thinking about it. Now you're attributing every single action to this really toxic idea.
Your commanding officer,
that people are
your
biased
sergeants, your squad mates to your left and to your right.
Yeah,
right?
It creates suspicion.
And everything that we are trying to do and should be trying to do in the military is overcome all of that and build that unit cohesion and say, leave all of that aside. It's all about merit. It's all about performance in training and then on the battlefield. And this is heading in the exact opposite direction.
It really is, and it's all BS. I mean, they'll throw unconscious bias studies out of court because look, this science has been completely debunked. And if you're listening to this, instructors who are putting this on, you better have some answers. We're coming for you. Mike's on the Armed Services Committee.
Pentagon.
All right, let's. We've got so many topics of politicization in the military. I think we're almost done though. Maybe let's go ahead and get to the transgender stuff. Okay, let's talk about this quickly because I already did a whole podcast on it. But I'm just going to read some non-deployable medical conditions. Right, if you have this, you can't deploy. Asthma, seizure disorders, diabetes, heat stroke.
Dental problems. Can't forget the
dental. I mean,
dental
God,
problem.
If you don't get your dental, oh my God, that was like everybody's nightmare.
Yeah.
Some
you can
ear
be super
disorder.
seal if you've got bad teeth. You're not going anywhere.
Musculoskeletal conditions, all sorts of them. Sleep apnea. Flat feet are an issue. Non-deployable psychiatric conditions, psychotic bipolar disorders. Suicide attempts, substance abuses, any kind of psychotic hospitalizations. Of course, there's a lot of different things under psychotic and bipolar disorders. Like there's obviously a lot of categories there. Look, there's a lot.
And to be clear, before you deploy for combat, we go through all of these evaluations. Right. You go through a whole series of them, through dentists, through psychological, through physical evaluations.
So
if you have any of these,
body mass index. I mean, there's a lot of things.
If you have any of these, you're not going to deploy. And eventually, if you can't deploy, you get thrown out of the military.
And so let's go over real quick what Trump's transgender ban actually was. It wasn't like a complete ban. A lot of people think it was. Okay. It's history or diagnosis of gender dysphoria unless stable for 36 months. No gender change, stay deployable and retainable, or you're grandfathered in between Obama opening and new policy. So the disqualification was mainly surrounding an actual medical transition. And those without history or diagnosis may continue to serve in their biological sex. So let's break that down in layman's terms. It basically says that, Mike, look, if you're part of my team and the next day you come to me and you're like, I am not Mike. I am.
I knew you were going to do this.
I'm Mandy. Okay. And I say, fine.
Michelle. Can we go with Michelle?
You're Mandy.
All right.
And
It's your podcast. Fine.
you're Mandy. You just kind of.
I like Mandy's.
All right. And I say, Mandy, just get back to work. Right. And that's it. That's the policy. Get back to work, Mandy. And you're like, whoa. I'm going to go get a medical transition. I say, you can't do that. Okay. You have to serve as Mike, but there's no don't ask, don't tell policy. Like you can't be fired for it. You get to be you. But just like you can't get tattoos on your face, okay? Like if you're Mike still and you're like, hey, Dan, I want to get tattoos on my face. You can't get tattoos on your face.
I want a ponytail down to my butt.
Yeah, you can't get a ponytail down. Well, SEALs can because we're cooler than you. But you can't, all right? Because like there's a lot of aesthetic standards in the military. There's behavioral standards. And I think this is the right way to talk about the transgender issue. I think that we should love every human for who they are. Right? When I see a trans person, I'm like, you're just a person to me. You're a person. I see you as a person. I do not want to dehumanize anybody. But if you behave differently, now I judge you according to that behavior. And if you're definitely behaving vastly different than you were yesterday, okay, you can't expect me to simply tolerate that, right? Because now you're infringing, now you're interacting with me in a different way. I hope that makes sense for people. And I think it's the right way to think about these difficult policy discussions when we're discussing this. But in the context of the military, I mean, the medical stuff and the medical side and that's why I started off reading that list of reasons you can't be in the military and reasons you can't deploy is because medical complications in the transgender with somebody who's transitioned are extreme. And like, I don't say that lightly. I mean, extreme. We did a podcast on that where we had a woman who transitioned to a man, and the complications that she talked about he talked about, because I'm not trying to misgender anybody, right? Like, so he's a he now, and they're extreme. And he's like, there's no way that somebody in my condition could possibly serve in the military. You just can't.
For me, the answer on this one is relatively, it's a complicated issue in terms of what they have to go through, but the answer to me continues to be in the KISS principle, keep it simple. It's about mission and it's about standards. And if you can hit those standards and you can accomplish the mission, then fine. I don't care what race, religion, socioeconomic background, gender, in between gender that you are. I think there's a real question of whether the taxpayer needs to foot the bill for you to get there.
That's the question.
That's one. But number two,
because you're footing a bill to make you undeployable. And it's like
you just read a whole list of medical conditions that the military has determined. If you have those conditions, you can't do the job that the military needs you to do, and that's it. What we can't have, and this slippery slope that we're going down, is starting to change the standards or adjust the mission so that we can check a box.
Right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. The standard is the standard. The mission is the mission. It can't be discriminatory. You know, the other side of that is the military can't modify those because they don't want certain people in. I mean, they did that in the past, whether it was on race. They've done it in the past at times on gender. We need to decide what the mission is, what the standard is, and that's it. And whoever fits that, fits it.
Yeah,
we need a military to fight and win wars.
But I will say that is true. But I would also say we should not deliberately allow somebody to undergo a medical procedure that ensures that they cannot meet the standard.
Absolutely, yeah. If they don't meet the standard after that procedure, that's it.
Right. Okay. Let's hit the Tucker Carlson thing.
Yeah.
So he got in hot water. Because let's just quote one of the things he said, and kind of the whole spiel was sort of along these lines. So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are going to fight our wars. It's a mockery of the U.S. military. I'm trying to see his broader point. I think he was just trying. I think he was obviously being provocative.
He started out the piece with the threat that is the Chinese military,
right? And
how they're creating super soldiers. How they're, they really are kicking our butts across the board when it comes to the new drone fight. The new stealth fighters they're rolling out, the ships that they're building. We need a wake up call to the Cold War that we're in as a military.
Right. He's right about that.
Meanwhile, and he's absolutely right about that. I disagree with him. The role of women have been, I think, fantastic in the military, but we can't have a military that's more about social engineering than it is about winning wars.
I think
that's what he was trying to get at. I think it was very inartful the way he got there.
I think he would have.
And I don't agree with what he said, to be clear.
Yeah.
Because again, as we said earlier, cyber warriors, pilots, logisticians, intel officers, and ones that meet the standards, special operators, infantry men and women, fine.
Right.
But we need the best of the best to deal with this threat.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely of multiple minds about this entire controversy, and we're going to unpack the military's response to it. But he would have been better off sort of being like, look, the Chinese are over here prioritizing this. And then he should have listed all the things that we've literally talked about on this podcast. We're concerned about when somebody can transition. We're concerned about our reading list being woke enough. We're concerned about all this nonsense. And the Chinese are talking about supersonic missiles and satellites that can, zap us like, Invasion from Mars or whatever that movie. Did I get that right?
They just signed an accord with Russia to have a manned station on the moon, and they're on track to do it.
Why is that comedy show Space Force so foretelling and prescient? I mean, Jesus. Okay. So yeah, he's definitely inartful, and I don't think he realizes that Congress funded different uniforms for pregnant women, and I think that's wholly understandable. Because they have to go buy different clothes.
I actually co-sponsored an initiative on maternity uniforms because the military was wasting so much money. I mean, these women were literally buying a new uniform as their pregnancy progressed every month, and we said, "Hey, military, why don't you just loan them some for a month and take it back and loan it to another woman, save millions and millions of dollars?" But
it's the wrong example to choose. If you're going to choose why the military screwed up,
there's all
you and
kinds
I just
of
went over
reasons,
a bunch of things.
To be clear, there's all kinds of reasons where our military is falling behind the Chinese. Women isn't one of them.
And pregnant women isn't one of them either.
No.
Again, that's not the issue.
But I think he was inartfully getting at what we have, this woke mentality.
That's why I want to do this
social
podcast.
Engineering, and that focus. And I go back to where are our priorities? I want us focused on building more and better ships, launching more and better rockets, having the best soldiers. I don't care what race, religion, background they come from, that can beat the other guy or deter them. This is what the left never understands about a strong military, is the peace through strength concept.
Right.
If they think they can beat us, that is actually going to lead them, and that's going to lead us closer to war.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so let's talk about the military's response. All right, this is where it all got interesting, and there was a lot of outrage over it. And so the claim is that there's a politicization of the military because the military is now going after a conservative journalist. Now, there's kind of some truth to that. And I would also say, like, taking another step back, like Biden is the one who made this a big deal by having a press conference about the new uniform. He's done other press conferences that are very woke in nature regarding the military.
He's just tripping over himself to pander to the left.
Look at me. I made 2 women, and I think a minority women, like in charge of this command. That's really annoying, actually, because it takes away from that woman's accomplishment.
Yeah, it's tokenism.
Treat her like everybody else.
How about you stand up and say, this general is the best general in the military to lead this command. Oh, by the way, happens to be a minority woman, but
and I'd love to ask her,
she's
like,
the best general.
How did that make her
evaluation?
Feel? Yeah, because it would make me feel like crap. You know, it would make me feel like I didn't get it out of my merits, and I bet she did. I bet she honestly did get it out of her merits. On the merits, and you know, but that should be the story.
Well, I know the 2 women that he was referring to. I know them by reputation. Their reputations are fantastic. They are fantastic leaders. They are great generals, and I think you're absolutely right. By having the first thing come out of your mouth that they were a minority or they're a woman is frankly insulting.
I think it's extremely insulting. Okay, so I forgot. I wanted to make that point. Okay, but then the Pentagon started talking. Look, some of these responses strike me as commanders kind of just defending their people, like in defending their institution. And I'm like, you know what? If somebody was talking crap about the SEAL teams and I was still active duty, yeah, I might hit back. So some of it strikes me as that. However, on the Pentagon's website, it leads with what does seem like a highly politicized response. Let me read it real quick. So, you know, this is right on the Pentagon's website. It says, Press Secretary smites, use the word smites host that dissed
That's
diversity.
a Navy word, I think, smite. I think that's one they use a lot in the Navy.
Is it?
He's an admiral, the press secretary, so it must be a big-time Navy word.
It's pretty funny.
It's on the reading list.
Look, it's, again, are they allowed to defend their institution? Yeah, but this is how it leads. The United States military is the greatest in the world. It is the greatest the world has ever seen because of its diversity. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby said during a news briefing this morning. So that's where you got woke, brother. That's where you got woke. So look, he's absolutely right that it does seem true that Tucker degraded the role of women in the military. I do see that, and I think it's wrong. And we've already talked. We've hit that point. Women have played a very exceptional and important role in the military. But this press secretary is absolutely wrong. It is not the greatest because of diversity. That is a completely false statement. And if that is your position, then I want you to back that up very clearly with facts and explain how we got there. Because I would actually point you to some Harvard sociologists that have really studied this and show that it's really the opposite. It actually, you know, the more diverse a community is, the more problems they tend to have. They don't like mix up and get to know each other. That's not what happens. They end up going into different cliques. It causes more issues. So that's on a kind of sociological level. But there's no way to reason your way through that, right? Like, why would diversity within a SEAL platoon make it better? You know, standards make it better. Everybody from all diverse backgrounds having to go through a certain selection course and kind of trial by fire to make it to a certain standard and then train together, that makes you an excellent force. And we've proven that over and over and over again. So that's proven. But this guy's saying diversity. And now we all know it's just buzzwords, right? This is just what it's kind of like this sort of, you know, religious mantra that is repeated over and over again. We're stronger because of diversity. And if you repeat it enough times, it becomes totally true. Well, I want to know why it's true. I mean, I really do. Like,
so, I mean,
what does it mean?
So just to take a step back, I mean, I think there's 2 fundamental sacred aspects to our military. One, civilian control of the military in our republic that makes us different than many countries in the rest of the world. And 2 is an apolitical military. So I agree with you. I think you're right in kind of defending the role of women, as we've talked about, and the great contributions that they make in our service. But I think where he crossed the line is then going after a journalist or opinion leader or what have you on a political point. If you want to take a defensive stance, fine. But that's not what that headline is. It leads with press secretary
smites.
Navy word, journalist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they could have handled it better. Like, defend your institution. I get that. But, like, don't get all silly about it. So I think both sides, you know, if we had to grade had this whole controversy, I'd say, like, both sides kind of screwed up on this one a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way I want to end this is let's talk more broadly. What do you think about flag officers in general just voicing their politics? Active duty, obviously off limits.
Yeah, not in uniform.
But non-active duty. I mean, retired. A lot of retired admirals writing letters against Trump. Retired generals and admirals supporting Trump. Same with Biden. Biden, doesn't elicit that kind of attention, just generally speaking. But
we have a long history of former military officers being fantastic, continuing that service and continuing to lead the country and bringing all of the things that they learned in their military service. Not just the experience overseas, but leadership, followership, teamwork, mission focus, a perspective on how this, maybe a country that always needs to improve, but truly is an exceptional country. I mean, that's why, you and I have talked a lot about how we need more veterans in our politics.
Yeah.
I'm not only fine with that, I encourage it.
Yeah.
In uniform, absolutely off limits. Once you're out of uniform, roll up your sleeves and continue to serve. You can't just sit at the VFW and tell war stories or write books in your case. And I have one too.
You wrote a book.
Yeah, fine. I knew you were going there. But not only fine with it, encourage it from Zachary Taylor to Grant to Eisenhower. We can go down the list.
I could argue it both ways. Because it kind of depends on how they do it. I think it might be maybe the better answer. Like it sort of depends. Some do it well and honorably, and others, especially when it's like a list of generals writing a political letter, because now you're not really speaking as a civilian. You are speaking with the rank of general or admiral. Because you all group together.
The danger there is now with so few people serving as compared to previous generations, a lot of people, frankly, don't understand the difference, to your point. And I think you have to be very clear when you're retired and when you're out of service and when you're in.
Yeah. There's, a lot of people think like the military politics and the politics of former officers are kind of interesting. Like the military leans conservative. Generally speaking, I think that's because the conservative disposition is risk taking. I've written a lot about this. I've got some research to back. We just take physical risks. It actually kind of explains the lockdown controversy. Why do red states prefer to be open and free and take that risk, and why do blue states not? We're just more comfortable with physical risk taking.
Yeah, I think there's some institutional things, but I also think there was a lot to do with where we were in history and anti-Trumpism and just reacting to anything.
There's a whole slew of explanations.
Yeah, sure.
And it's an interesting conversation, a psychological one. But people who are already conservative tend to say, okay, I'll join the military, I'll join law enforcement, I'll be a lumberjack, I'll do physically risky things. Mm-hmm. This is borne out in the data. So that might be why they end up dispositionally more conservative. But there's a lot of very liberal people in the military too. And I think one of the attractions of the military is that it's the largest bureaucracy in the world. And there's this sense of like, I can just decide to do things. I can centralize this control and I can do things. And I love that. So people ask, because I'll get that question from constituents sometimes, like, how? They're from the military. How are they so liberal? And I'm like, well, think about it. Because the bureaucracy is so extreme. And so it really lends itself to a more liberal set of policymaking. Let's get the COVID out.
Get it out.
Okay.
Got it. Her direction.
I've
got the antibodies.
So that's my theory anyway, and I think that, again, because it's a mix, right? Like you see liberal. I don't see a lot of flag officers in Congress, which is interesting. There's a lot more people like mid-career types like us. Why do you think that is?
Because I think that they've since invested so much. I mean, you've drug your family around for so long. In the Army's case, to so many horrible places in the middle of nowhere where you can run around in tanks and the countryside where the town is typically built up around the base. So you sacrifice so much at that point. Whereas I think for us, we got out of the military for a lot of our frustrations, where we see like-minded individuals with confirmation bias promoting like-minded individuals. Really what it takes, the sacrifice in the all-volunteer military to get to that flag officer rank. where and really the corporate ladders that you have to climb.
Yeah.
You know, the boxes that you have to check. And I think, frankly, folks like you get frustrated with that.
Well, I lost my eye. That's the only reason I got
Well,
it.
there's that too.
You said the word corporate, and that reminded me, I did want to bring this up, maybe to wrap us up, which is one of the problems with the way I see too many flag officers acting is they act too much like CEOs. And actually, that's one of the reasons I think they don't even get into politics, is because they become very corporate. And I'm going to use that word.
The difference in a manager and a leader, right?
Yeah, and sort of highly risk averse, which is very corporate, right? The goal, this is why corporations give into woke cancel culture so fast, because they're like, what do I have to do just to have nothing else happen?
Yeah.
Now, I think that's bad long-term thinking because, it's going to be painful for like a few days and, oh my God, all the tweets, but then it's over, right? And everybody's buying Goya, okay? Like it works. Standing up to cancel culture actually works. And I see too many flag officers, and the reason we're doing this podcast is because I think there's way too. Okay, fine, let's put it on the reading list. Okay, fine, just do the confirmation or the unconscious bias training. Just do it. It's fine. Like if we do it, then they'll think we're one of them, and we can. It's like The Walking Dead, where you like drape blood and guts all over you, and the zombies around you think that you're one of them. That's like the same with woke culture.
Well, no, but you raise a great point in the terms of risk aversion, and I actually have a whole chapter of that in my book.
You can talk about it.
No, it's all good. But I have a chapter about it in combat where that 1 year deployment on an otherwise very promising career, you're just on the cusp of promotion. The driving force is don't screw it up. Don't have a base overrun. Don't have your soldiers losing sensitive items. Don't have, any kind of sexual harassment charges or anything along those lines. The default reaction to controversy becomes inaction.
Right.
Or becomes lack of action and risk aversion. And I think it is because in an all volunteer, think about it, the draft force where you're pulled out of your life, pulled out of your career, your business, and sent over there, you're incentivized to take every risk necessary to accomplish the mission, win the war, so you could get back home. But now in the all volunteer force or the career force, it becomes don't screw up the promising career that I've sacrificed so much for my family, and risk aversion has seeped through our entire force. And I think that's a great point to draw that line, connect the dots between that and the wokeism. It's just keep giving, because otherwise I don't want to get blown up, I don't want to get canceled, and I don't want my promotion ruined.
It's the safe route. And frankly, one of the reasons I want to do this podcast, the reason I've been speaking out this week, is because I don't want it to be safe anymore, right? No more safe spaces for wokeism in the military.
It's not safe on the Armed Services Committee, at least not on my half.
Good. It shouldn't be. And, it's time we step up. That's why we're doing this. And it's going to get fought for. Like we have to fight for our institutions that protect our country. It's one of the most important we have.
Train, fight, and win wars. That needs to be the focus.
And be a Navy SEAL, not a Green Beret. Okay, that's it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike. That was awesome. Appreciate it.
Hey, go Army, beat Navy.
All right, I'll give you that last word.